All right, guys. Questions on the homework. Question on the homework assignment from yesterday. So, what we're doing today is more factoring. So we're going over more types of factoring and factoring these polynomial expressions. So when we look at polynomials, first thing we were going to do, first main step is greatest common factor. So we looked at this here. We look at 8x squared minus 56x plus 48. We need to see if there's a greatest common factor between these three terms. Now, most likely there is, because 8, 56, and 48 are all even. So 2, at minimum, is a greatest common factor. So 8 would be the next nice choice. Give it a second, let the calculator pull up, because if 8 works, that means 56 and 48 both have to be divisible by 8. Because 56 divided by 8 is 7. So that works. And then the middle term was 48. 56 and 48. So 56 works. 48 divided by 8 is 6. So 8 would be our greatest common factor. X squared minus 7x plus 6. Bless you. Our second set is 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Bless you. I didn't write it out, I just put parentheses, just shorthand. Shorten it up a little bit. So that means we're going to rewrite it. We still need the greatest common factor of 8, because we need that 8 and then 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Third step is to find the sign. If third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Out of room. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So as we look back up this here, the third term in this case is positive. So the signs are the same and are going to match the sign of the middle term, which in our case would be negative. And part of the reason this works is because we're going to multiply the numbers in those third spots inside the parentheses. And a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. If they're both positive, a positive times a positive is still a positive. And the reason it's going to match the sign of the middle term is because when we get those middle terms, we're adding them, we're combining them. So if they're both negative, it's going to stay negative, because a negative plus a negative is still a negative. A positive plus a positive is still a positive. So the middle term tells us what the signs are going to be. Now, if the third term is negative, the signs are opposite, because the only way I can multiply two things together and get a negative is if one's positive and one is negative. So it just tells us that they're opposite. Now, the next step is to look at the factors of the first and third term. Step number 4, factors of the first and third term. And our last step is to plug in and check. So we're looking at the factors. We're looking at the factors of x squared and 6. Yes? Factors of x squared are is x and x. We can list them out, but there's only one real set of factors for x squared, and that's x and x. Now, since it's part of the factors of the first term, we're going to put those factors in the first space in either set of parentheses. Only one set, so we can just plug them in. Now, factors of 6. We have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Now, at this point here, we need to pick one of those sets of factors to try first, and then we can check and make sure we got it right. 1 and 6 or 2 and 3? 1 and 6. 2 and 3? We can do 1 and 6. And check it first. Because the middle term we're wanting to get is negative 7x. Now we're not going to check the first x times x, because x times x is x squared. We got that from the factors of x squared. They should go back. 1 and 6 should still multiply to get us positive 6. Negative 1 times negative 6 is indeed positive 6. There's no real reason to check those. Now x times negative 6 would be negative 6x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. And negative 6x minus x, negative 6 minus 1 is indeed negative 7x. And that is the middle term that we wanted. So this here is our factored form. Question? Yeah, I also have the steps written on the whiteboard. They kind of go backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I should have put the 1, 2, 3 where the 4, 5 is, and the 4, 5 where the 1, 2, 3 is. That way it's not stepping backwards. Questions on this here? 14x squared plus 31x plus 15. Again, it's always good to look for a greatest common factor, a number that will go into all three terms. Now, one thing that might be helpful for finding greatest common factor with multiple terms is I'd see whichever number is the smaller number, because a smaller number is going to have less factors, less numbers to look for. So if we look at, say, 14, factors of 14 are 1, 2, 7, and 14. And if we look at the other numbers, 31 and 15, 2 is not a factor of either one. 7 is not a factor of 15. 14 is not a factor of 15, so there is no greatest common factor. Because we could try to look at all the numbers, but if I look at the factors of one and compare it to the others, it kind of makes the numbers that we're looking at for possible greatest common factors a whole lot smaller. So there is no greatest common factor between these three terms. So we can move on to step number 2, our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Find the sign. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here, our third term is positive. So the signs are going to be the same and are going to be whatever the middle term is. Since the middle term is positive, they're both going to be plus. If the middle term is negative, they're both going to be minus. Questions on steps 1 through 3 before we look at step number 4. Step 4 is the factors of the first and third terms. So our first term is 14x squared. Well, that variable being squared tells me I'm going to have x and x. The only way that works for this here. Factors of 14, we do have more than one. We do have 1 and 14, 2 and 7. Factors of 15, we have 1 and 15, 3 and 5, and that's it. And I'm looking at factors, especially bigger numbers. I start with 1 in the number itself, And on the left side, I go from 1, I check 2, then I check 3, then I check 4, and we keep increasing the left side till it either A, meets the right-hand side, or B, the number on the right-hand side has already been listed. So we have 2 choices for 14, 2 choices for 15. Factor of 14, which one do we want to try first? 2 and 7. Factor of 15, you want to try first? 3 and 5. Because at this point here, we just really need to look at it, plug it in, and see if it works. Because the more that we do these here, the more we'll see and kind of get a guess at which ones might work better or more likely be the correct factor that we need. Because 2x times 5, 2 times 5 would be 10x, positive 10x. 3 times 7x, 3 times 7 would be 21. We still have the x, they're both positive, so 10x plus 21x, 10 plus 21 is 31x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yeah. And that's it. If it wasn't, the first thing I would do is switch to 5 and 3 and try again. If that doesn't work, then we would switch to 2 and 7 for 1 and 14 and try it again. But since we got it on the first try, we're done. This is it. Questions on this here? Two x squared minus 7x plus 5. Kind of already gave it away, but there is no greatest common factor between 2, 7, and 5. So we can move on to writing 2 sets of parentheses with free space. The third term is positive, so the signs are going to be the same and match the sign of the middle term. So we'd have negative and negative. Now we're going to look at the factors of the first and third term. So factors of 2x squared. Well, x squared has to be x and x. That's the only way we can multiply together to get x squared. Factors of 2, 1 and 2. Since there's only one set of factors, we can plug it in. Now, if it does help, 2x squared to be x times 2x, and write it out and write those factors out, do that. If it doesn't, you don't have to. You can also look at the factors of 5, and the factors of 5 are 1 and 5. Yep. And that's it. And again, if it helps to write out the factors, even if we only have one, you want to write them out. So we have this here. So we plugged it in. The last thing we need to do is to check. Now 2x times negative 5. 2 times negative 5 would be negative 10x. Negative 1 times x is going to be negative x. Negative 10x minus x, negative 10 minus 1 is going to be negative 11. Negative 11x. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. Well, we can switch to 1 and 5. And try it again. 2x times negative 1, 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Still have the x. Negative 5 times x, negative 5 times 1 would be negative 5x. And negative 2x minus 5x is negative 7x. So 2x minus 5 times x minus 1 are our factors. Questions on these here? Questions on these here so far? We feel good about these so far? 3x squared minus 14x plus 8. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Well, no. If we looked at the smallest number is 3. The only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Greatest common factor, 1 doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. So we'd see if 14 and 8 are divisible by 3. Neither one is, so there is no greatest common factor. So we move on to our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now we find the sign. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Here, the third term is positive, so the signs are the same and going to match the sign of the middle term. And the middle term is negative, so we have a negative and a negative. Now we need to find the factors of the first and the third term. Our first term is 3x squared. Well, the only factors of x squared are going to be x and x, x and x. Factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Since we only have one set, one choice, might as well just stick the 3 and 1 in one of the two spots, x and x. Let's say we're in factors of the first term, they're going in the first spots, so 3x and x. Factors of 8, on the other hand, we have 1 and 8, 2 and. Now we need to pick which one of these that we're going to use. 2 and 4. Do you want the 2 in the first spot? Okay. And we can check this here. 3x times negative 4, 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. X. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 12 minus 2 is negative 14. Negative 12x minus 2x is negative 14x. That is the middle term we wanted. So we have 3x minus 2 times x minus 4. Questions on this here? Are you ready for the next one? (4x squared minus 19x minus 5). Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? No, the smallest number is 5. Its only factors 1 and 5. 4 is not divisible by 5. Well, 4 is also, would have been the smallest number, actually. Still, no greatest common factor. So we move to two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. We got that. Find the sign. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So our third term, its sign is what? Negative. So the signs are opposite. Since the third term is negative, signs are opposite. So one of the signs is positive, the other is negative. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. We don't really look at the middle term. Middle term can kind of help us see what possible arrangements. But since the third term is negative, signs are opposite. That's it. We're not even looking at the middle term if the third term is negative. Third term's negative, one's positive, one's negative. Now, it doesn't matter which one we put as positive, which one's negative. We just need to put one sign as positive, one sign as negative. I normally just default to plus, minus, as we have written here. Then we just move on to our next step, finding the factors of the first and third term. So 4x squared, well, I know for sure x squared is going to be x and x. Now, the factors of 4 are 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. Which one do we want to try first? 1 and 4. You want the 4 with the plus or with the minus? Okay. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5. Are there any others? Where do you want to put the 5? With the 4? Over here? All right. And we can check this here. 4x times negative 5. 4 times negative 5 would be negative 20. X. 1 times x is going to be plus 1x. Negative 20 plus 1 is going to be negative 19. And we have our x. So this is the correct middle term. So we get this here. 4x plus 1 times x minus 5. Questions on this here? Now, especially when we have opposite signs, this plus and minus, we can set it up and get the correct number but wrong sign. And those are easy. Flip the signs. Because if we'd done this and gotten positive 19 instead of negative 19, we switch the plus and minus in the factored form, and then we'll change that sign. So let's look at this one here. First thing we would look for is a greatest common factor. If a is negative, factor it out. But there's not a common factor between 6x squared, x, and negative 6. Sorry, negative 12. 6x squared, x, and 12. There is no greatest common factor. So we have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Third term's negative, the signs are opposite. Here, our third term is negative. Its sign is negative, so our signs are plus and minus. Factors of 6x squared. X squared is kind of nice. It's just x and x. Factors of 6 aren't bad. We have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Now we can plug them in at this point. I'm going to go on and find the factors of our third term, factors of 12. Because our factors of 12, we have 1 and 12. Then we have 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So we have a lot of options that we could choose for this here. Now, I'm going to put this one up here, more or less to make a point. Say I pick 2 and 6, okay? You don't have to write this one down. And I'll pick, say, 2 and 3. Now, we said at the beginning there is no greatest common factor between 6x squared, x, and 12, yes? Well, most likely there should be a greatest common factor in either set of parentheses, because if there is, we can factor it out. If we can factor it out of the parentheses, we should have been able to factor it out of the one to begin with, yes? So what's the problem with the one I just wrote? 2x plus 2 is the greatest common factor of 2, yes? Well, that shouldn't work. 3x minus 6 has the greatest common factor of 3, yes? Okay, well, that doesn't work. That's fine. I'll just switch the 3 and 2 for our factors of 6, yes? 3x plus 2. 3x and 2 does not have a greatest common factor. So we're good there. The other one is 2x plus 6 has a greatest common factor of 2. So no matter how I set that one up, I would have a greatest common factor in either case, yes? Okay. You know what? I'm going to do 6 and 1 for our factors of 6. 6x plus 2 has the greatest common factor of 2, yes? That didn't work. Okay, fine. Let's switch the 6 to the other side. 6x plus 6 has the greatest common factor of 6. That's gone. 2 and 6. There's no way I could set up 2 and 6 with our factors of 6 from the 6x squared and get one that works, because we would always have a greatest common factor. So I could pick 2 and 3 for 6x squared. But I know immediately that 2 and 6, no matter how we set it up, is not going to work. So would we want to try 1 and 12 or 3 and 4? 3 and 4. Because I know if we put 4 here and 3 here, 2x and 4 would have a greatest common factor of 2. If we check this, and I go through and check this, 2x times negative 3 would be negative 6x. 4 times 3 is plus 12x, giving us positive 6x. It doesn't work, but also we can see that because there is a greatest common factor, it's not going to work anyways. So the only way we can use 2 and 3 from 6 and 3 and 4 from 12 is if we have 2x plus 3 times 3x minus 4. Now we can check this here. 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. 3x times 3x is positive 9x, which does indeed give me positive x. Questions on this here? Are y'all understanding the factor thing? Yes? Because really, it took out 1, 2, 3, 4, just with the 2 and 6. We got rid of 4 possible things we had to check. Then with the one that we had, we took out a 5th one. 1 and 12 doesn't work, so that's another 2. That's 7 we didn't have to check. 7 we didn't have to write down, check, and see if they work. That's why that's nice, because we're removing possible arrangements that we don't have to check. We don't have to see if they work. I think we have, what, 3 more? I'm trying to remember. 4 more. Let's look at this one here. We want to factor negative 4x squared minus 8x plus 5. Negative 4 and negative 8, 5, or 4, 8, 5. Is there a greatest common factor between those 3? Oh, but a is negative, yes? So we need to factor it out. It's going to make it easier to factor if that first term is positive. We can still factor it if that first term is negative. It just makes this a little bit more challenging. Now, since there's not a number for 4, 8, and 5, we just are going to take out that negative. When we factor a negative out of negative 4x squared, it's going to become positive 4x squared. When we take the negative out of negative 8x, it's going to become positive 8x. And when we factor the negative out of positive 5, it's going to become negative 5. And we get this here. Now, so the only thing that we're doing is just pulling that negative out. Now, the reason we do that and the reason I would want to do this is it's not going to change the step. It wouldn't change the process if we left it as negative 4x squared. The only thing that would change is when we looked at the factors of the first term, we have to look at the factors of negative 4, not just 4. I would rather get rid of that negative and not have to worry about that. Now the steps hold true. Factors of the third, to find the sign, we look at the third term. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Here, the third term is negative, so our signs are opposite. Now we look at the factors of the first and third term. So our first term is 4x squared. Only factors of x squared are x and x. And our factors of 4 are 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. Now at this point here, we can try picking one of these. We can wait for the factors of the third term to go from there. If we do that, the factors of the third term, 5, are 1 and 5. Only one set, so I'm just going to plug them in. Now at this point here, we still haven't plugged in the factors of 4. Which one do we want to try? 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? 2 and 2. And then we can check this here because we're trying to get a middle term of 8x. 2x times negative 5 would be negative 10x. 1 times 2x is going to be plus 2x. And negative 10x plus 2x, negative 10 plus 2 would be negative 8x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Well, yes and no. Because yes, we did want it to be 8, but we wanted it to be positive, not negative. So an easy fix for this is I'm going to switch my signs. Ending up with, we could, yes. In this case, yeah, switching the 1 and 5 would work too. Now, switching the 1 and 5 works mainly because the first term is 2x and 2x. So the same, switching the 1 and 5 does fix that. Now, if it had been 4x and x, we'd have to switch the 1 and 5 and 1 and 4. We'd have to change everything. So, yeah, switching the 1 and 5 in this case works. And I would still check and make sure 2x times 5 is positive 10x. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x, giving us 8x. So we have negative parentheses 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 5. Now, if you had negative times 2x plus 5 times 2x minus 1, you had the parentheses, what's inside the parentheses flipped. That works too. That's the nice thing about multiplication. We can multiply any two things in any order. Are you ready for the next one? Negative 9x squared minus 3x plus 2. Is there a greatest common factor between 9x squared, 3x, and 2? No. But that first term is negative. I like having the first term positive. It makes things nicer. So we can pull that negative out. All it's going to do is change the sign. So 9x squared is going to go from negative to positive. 3x is going to go from negative to positive. 2 is going to go from positive to negative. Two sets parentheses with 3 spaces. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same, and that's the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here the third term is negative, so our signs are opposite. Now we're going to look at the factors of the first and third term. Our first term is 9x squared. X squared would be x and x. Factors are 1 and of 9, or 1 and 9 or 3 and 3. Which one do we want to try first? 9 and 3. Factors of 2 are 1 and 2. Are there any others for 2? No. So where do you want to put the 2? With the plus or minus? Well, with the plus. And it really doesn't matter. We just have to pick a spot. Well, let's try and, okay. Not to erase that. Okay. So we'd have 3x times negative 2. 3 times negative 2 would be negative 6, and we still have our x. Positive 1 times 3x would be positive 3x, telling us that our middle term is negative 3. So at this point here, we can do one of two things. Since our first terms are 3x and 3x, we can switch the 1 and 2 or switch the plus and minus. Either way works. My default is normally just switching the plus and minus. The negative or the minus sign gets an extra line, and the plus just gets rewritten. And what that gives us is 3x times 2 is 6x. Negative 1 times 3x is negative 3x. Changing our sign from negative 3x to positive 3x as our middle term, telling us that negative times 3x minus 1 times 3x plus 2 is the correct factorization of this here. Questions on this here? Now, yes, if there was a negative in front of our m, in this case, m squared or x squared, that term, and a greatest common factor, we would take both out. We would take the negative and the number. M squared, x squared, v squared, treat them the same. If you accidentally write the answer for this here as x instead of m, it's just a variable. I'm not taking off for that. So, first thing we can do here is factor out the negative, because there is no other greatest common factor besides the negative 1. We could write it as negative 1, and then the parentheses, or we just write it as the negative. So we have negative, then our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here the third term is positive. So the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Negative and negative. So really the only time we're looking at the sign of the middle term is if the third term is positive. If that third term is negative, signs are opposite, plus minus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third terms. Factors of 5m squared, well, m squared would be m and m. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5, yes? Any other factors? Where do you want to put the 5? Doesn't really matter, does it? No. Factors of 1. 1 and 1. So hopefully this works. 5m times negative 1 is negative 5m. Negative 1 times m is negative m. Negative 5m minus m, negative 5 minus 1 would indeed be negative 6m. We're trying to find the middle number. Yeah. There are a lot of books and a lot of methods that, especially when they say check, multiply the whole thing back out. Multiply back out and see, do we get 5m squared minus 6m plus 1? I think that's tedious because the 5m times m, well, 5 times 1 is 5m times m is m squared. So 5m times m is 5m squared. But we got the 5 and m from the factors of 5m squared. So if you don't feel confident about finding factors, then it's good to check the whole thing. But I know that 5m and m are the factors of 5m squared. By definition, the factors are going to multiply back together to be 5m squared. 1 and 1 are going to multiply together to give us 1. There's no reason to check those two, at least in my opinion. Questions on these here? Do we feel comfortable with these? Okay. 11 through 23 odd. You have 7 problems. So 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, and 23. 23, I believe, is the error detection. Error detection has 2 parts. State the error, say what they did wrong, fix it. If you're struggling to figure out what they did wrong, look at the polynomial or the quadratic they gave you to factor it yourself, and then compare it to see how it differed. Yes?